Let's talk now, though, about something much closer to home than Russia or indeed a Saudi princess. But Wales and poverty. Nearly a quarter of people in Wales are living in poverty, at the highest rate in the UK. That's according to a new report released by the Joseph Rowntree Foundation today. Their monitoring report warns that poverty is increasing among pensioners, among single people and couples with children. It's a rate of 23%, they say, which is highest in the land. Let's talk about this with Helen Barnard. She's head of analysis at the Joseph Rowntree Foundation and joins us now. Good morning to you, Helen.
Good morning.
Good morning. So what is it specifically about what's happening in Wales that is leading to such high levels of poverty?
What I think we're seeing is this tide of low-paid, insecure jobs, which is meaning that lots of people are getting into work, but they're not getting into the kind of work that lets them earn enough to reach a decent standard of living. And at the same time, you've also got a tide of rising costs, particularly housing. So those two things together are sweeping people into poverty.
Well, indeed. I mean, obviously, people on very low incomes will get a lot of help with their housing costs in terms of housing benefit, won't they? But let's just clarify what we mean by poverty, because obviously that is relative poverty, not absolute poverty. It's a particular term. And it's living in a household where your income after housing costs is less than 60% of the median income. And that's the key indicator. But there are lots of parts of the country where people are struggling with low-paid, insecure jobs. What is specific to Wales? Is it? I mean, is it that there was such a collapse in the mining industry, in manufacturing, it hasn't been replaced? Where is this problem particularly arisen in Wales?
Well, I mean, we do obviously see it elsewhere in the country. Just on the housing thing, you're right, obviously, a lot of people get help with housing benefit. But one of the really worrying things that we're seeing is more and more people are actually having to top up housing benefit with their other income. So for people, particularly in the private rented sector, the majority now, housing benefit, if you're on low income, isn't actually covering that rent yet. And obviously that means people are kind of getting swept into not being able to
surely
meet
that would be less of a
costs.
problem somewhere like Wales, where housing is an awful lot cheaper than in many of our bigger cities in the rest of the country.
It's less of a problem than it is in the south of England, but what we've seen is the proportion of people in the poorest states who are having to spend more than a third of their income on housing has gone up, and it's now just over 4 in 10 people on low incomes in Wales are having to spend that much money on housing. And obviously it makes it, when we've got fuel prices going up as well, we've had food prices going up, it starts getting very hard to stretch everything to cover that.
And yet we have seen, haven't we, a very, very encouraging figures regarding unemployment going up and the number of workless households falling hugely over recent years as a result. The Tories would claim as a result of their benefit changes and other changes. Who knows how much it's down to any government policy as opposed to just economic cycles and the like, and the realities of daily life. But what are you asking in terms of the government? What are you asking in terms of action for them to do to tackle this issue?
Well, you're right. So one of the big trends in the last 20 years, actually, has been a switch from poverty being largely about worklessness to now the majority of people in poverty are in working households. And one thing that means is we need to look at how our economy and how our markets work. So we've ended up designing a housing market which prices a lot of people out of affordable housing, and a jobs market which traps a lot of people in low-paid work that's not really taking them to a decent standard of living.
How is it trapping? How is it trapping them?
Well, one thing we see is that there's been a big increase in employment in Wales, but when you look at what kind of jobs that is, it's a lot of low-paid, part-time jobs, a lot of low-paid self-employment and temporary work. So when you look at part-time work, particularly a lot of families who are depending on somebody working part-time, those jobs tend to be low-paid. And some other research we looked at shows that if you're working part-time, you actually don't get any wage progression. So you can work for years.
Well, no, of course not, because you're a part-time worker. They're not going to see you as someone who's committed to the job. But the reality is anybody who's working part-time is going to struggle to pay their bills. I'd struggle to pay my bills if I worked part-time. So would most people listening right now.
Sure. I mean, actually, I'd question that about, I know many, many people who work part-time who are incredibly committed. There are lots of people who do very high-powered jobs part-time. So I don't think we should expect that.
There aren't.
There are.
There really aren't.
There aren't.
There aren't. I'm sorry, there just simply aren't. Most jobs where you have to be fully committed, which are well paid, are full-time jobs. They just simply are.
There are many, but there are lots of people working part-time who are directors of companies who are working for incredibly high-level posts. You can be.
Well, we're not. Yeah, but we're not talking about those people. We're talking about people who are scratching by to make ends meet and bring food on the table. And a lot of that comes down to, as lots of people listening right now to Talk Radio will know, actually the hours that you work. If you're on a low income, you're getting low pay. It's all in the hours. And the more hours you do, the more money you come in. And people who are working part-time, and if they can't get full-time work, that's an issue. But if they're working part-time and can't make ends meet, there is a simple solution to that, isn't it? Working full-time.
Well, it's worth noting that poverty rates for people, houses where you've got everyone in work, are also going up.
But those statistics aren't for people working full-time. I've looked into those statistics in great detail. They're for people who are working between them as a couple 3 days a week. Most couples work 10 days a week between them. Yes, it is true. I've looked into the figures. I've absolutely double-checked it with the Work and Pensions Department.
When you look at the poverty rates for lone parents working full-time in the UK, those are going up. So those are people who are working all that anybody would expect. And to be honest, I think that as a society, we believe that everybody should be able to reach a decent standard of living. And when you have over 250,000 disabled people in poverty in Wales, many of whom are in work, I think we know that's not right. There is something wrong with our economy.
Listen, I think everybody.
People in that.
I absolutely. If you do a full day's work and you work a full week, you should be able to have a decent standard of living. Absolutely, I think everyone would agree with you on that. And absolutely, people who are disabled should absolutely make sure they are living a decent standard of living. No question at all. But that's not the vast majority of the people that we're talking about in this story. Thank you very much indeed, Helen Barnard. She's head of analysis at the Joseph Rowntree Foundation. Just briefly bring in Chris Williamson, Labour MP for Derby North. You're shaking your head at me this morning. Look, obviously we've got issues in terms of people on low incomes and insecure work, part-time work and the like. But an awful lot of the time when we're talking about people not in work, this in-work poverty, I think poverty is often too strong a word, I believe. And B, we're not talking about people working full-time. So, of course, they can't afford their standard of living.
Well, what I would say is that our economic system is utterly broken. We are the 6th richest nation on earth, and yet we have increasing numbers of people in poverty, people who are in work, who are in poverty, and that's certainly a different to what used to be the case.
People who work 2 days a week, funnily enough, can't pay their rent.
But
imagine everyone's
that's a feature,
surprised.
though, of a broken economic system. What we should be creating is
We've got the highest employment we've ever had.
Yes, but that's the point, though, Julia. Many of the jobs are part-time or zero-hour contracts. But
what percentage of jobs in this economy are 0 hours, Chris?
I think there's about 1 million or so
what
people.
What percentage of jobs in this economy?
I couldn't give you the percentage. It's
around 2%.
But
under 2%.
But nevertheless, you've got zero-hour contracts together with low pay, together with part-time work. This is a feature of the modern economy. It's a fact. But the other thing I want to just say is about our broken housing system too. We have a massive housing crisis in this country. We're spending £24 billion a year subsidising high rents. We're not building the houses that people need, and it would be far better, in my view, to build the council houses that people need. That could be done effectively for zero cost, because the cost of the construction the cost of construction is funded from the rental stream that people pay their council rents. That would put people, hundreds of thousands of people back to work, create the houses that people need, and reduce the social security bill, because at the moment we're subsidising high rents in the private rental sector.
Chris, on this you will find me in 100% agreement. We need to build more. You haven't persuaded me.
You're bound to get some things right occasionally, Julia.
Regular Talk Radio listeners will know I go on about this at least every day. I just start every show with build more houses. Just build some houses. That would be a start.